Welcome, everyone, to Game Night Episode 15. Joining us today is my regular partner in crime, Eric Kane. But we have a special guest, a failed screenwriter, Ken Levine. His words, not mine. And he just happens to be the creator of one of the most iconic and most influential franchises, and on the verge of releasing another banger in Judas. Ken, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
And that franchise is Bioshock, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that's kind of just Bioshock, not a big deal.
It's just in case, people don't know. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Ken.
Glad to. Eric, I listened to this podcast a couple times. Eric, I listened to, as you know, a ton of your stuff over the years. And, I've bitched you before. It's not as consistent as I would like to see.
Yeah, I know.
But I always enjoy it. And at some point, we'll have to argue about. I watched your review of The White Lotus, and I disagree with anything you said, but I also really liked it at the same time.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with other people. They're like, you make a lot of good points, but I loved it. And I'm like, okay. I think with The White Lotus this season, I liked lots of parts of the season, Like there were so many great parts, but they just didn't come together to in a satisfying way for me in the end.
I think it's more upset on how much most shows just fucking suck now. That anything that's...
I'm right with you. I love the show, and I love the setting and the characters, and really the path. The storylines were great for about 6 episodes, maybe even 7. But I could see the finale on the horizon. I'm like, they're going to rush this, and it's going to be obvious. And it was, and the finale was atrocious. I just thought it was terrible. But again, like you, I like the show, so what can I do?
And
a
there's
real
a lot
tidbit
of
here.
Sure.
I got a tidbit here for you, Ken. Maybe I can surprise you. I was in for a wedding in 2015. I was in the Bahamas on Treasure Island. There's a hotel there called Atlantis. It's like, casino stuff, whatever. So we're in the sports, betting area, my wife and I and a whole group. And of course, my wife's like, can we just not do this? This is boring. So we just go on a walkabout, a search. And we go down these stairs and there's this massive throne and it's oceanic. So we just keep going. Well, we come across this massive water park. And the entire thing is Bioshock themed, and not just themed, bitten. Like there is a Big Daddy in the gift shop. Here, I'm going to show you. Everything is Art Deco down to the font. And I tried to dig out pictures I had from my trip, but I just didn't have the time. But I found one, and that is the bar area called Fathom. And it's like the colors, the wear and tear of it all. Like this entire water park is Bioshock themed. I know that's hard to see, but maybe there's some money in it for you. You got to look into it.
What's it? I'm just curious. What's the resort called?
Atlantis. It's on Treasure Island in the Bahamas.
Treasure Island.
I don't know. That's really random.
Oh, here you go. I visited the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas. Yeah, cool. I'll have to find some pictures of it. Oh, is this cheap by you? No. There's some picture of Fathoms as well. Yeah, cool. Was it fun?
Oh, well, it was closed, so it was late. It was late at night, but we got to just walk around and stuff. I was like, I would love to come back and do this, but it was a wedding, so all our time was dictated for. So I just thought I'd share that.
To be fair, we certainly didn't invent Art Deco, so
this is true.
We steal from others. People can steal from us.
Stealing, it's what it's all about. I mean,
that's what it's all about, baby.
Great art, right?
Yeah.
So lots to discuss in a short amount of time. I know you have a bit of a heart out, so I'll bring that up as we get closer and go from there. I'm just gonna start like how's it going? How's life? And what games are you playing right now? What are you into other than working your ass off on Judas? And you can swear on the show, by the way.
That's excellent because I will.
Lovely.
I've been working a lot. I've been doing a lot of writing. The game is getting there. And pretty much writing every day at night. Like I work during the day, I write at night. But when I get time, let's see, I've been playing Atomfall, which is interesting. I don't know if you guys have played it.
Not yet.
I haven't got to it yet, but I've heard people talk about it. Very Fallout inspired.
Yeah, very old school. Very feels like a game from like the Xbox 360 era, which is a compliment, I think. There were good games there. It's definitely taken a lot of chances from this company, Rebellion, which I've also been playing a ton of another one of their games, the Sniper Elite series, which I a year ago tuned into, and it's sort of like a mini. If you never played it, it sounds kind of like it sounds very like military sim shooter, but it's actually more like like an immersive sim. Like you have these challenges, and every area you can stealth into, or you can go in the front door, you can sneak around the side, or go through the tunnels. So it has that very Deus Ex feeling, but sort of like a Deus Ex with not with the story focus, but with a environmental sim focus. Great stealth system, great stealth feedback. I've been playing a ton of that. I played it all through. A friend at Microsoft gave me Game Pass for a year, so I played it through on Game Pass, and then I missed it after I got out of Game Pass and bought it again. And so I played the new one, which just came out, and I played that through twice, and then I went back and replayed Sniper Elite 5. So I don't know, like, I'm not a big no sim shooter, but I can tell you, if you like immersive sims, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I've played some of those. Yeah, they're good. It's almost like puzzle solving, because you have to figure out like how to get through all the bad guys and get your sniper lines. And I actually talked with Jason Kingsley, who's the head of a Rebellion, a few years ago at I think it was E3. He's an interesting guy. He like is really into medieval stuff. He has like suits of armor. And
have you watched his YouTube series about like?
I've watched a little bit, yeah. Where he like all the
medieval hair, and he wears like medieval clothes, and he talks about life in the era. It's great.
Yeah, it's interesting that they make these World War II sniper games, because he's just like obsessed with medieval stuff, which is amazing. And yeah, he's an interesting guy. But they
bought like the 2000 AD comics, I think, and they have like, if you go to their webpage, they've got like a film studio there. They've got like a CGI, a special effects house. Like those guys, the two brothers, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Chris and Jason,
and they're both like knights, I think, MBEs, and they've really built a really cool business. And I'm telling you, like, Sniper Elite's a pretty seriously good game, and I really appreciate what they're trying to do with Atomfall. And I haven't really played a lot of their games until recently, but they're definitely in the AA space and doing really interesting stuff there.
Yeah, they're in a really interesting space in the industry, because they are kind of like one of these examples of like a independent company that's very successful, making a very specific type of game, making a bunch of those games, and they're quality games that sell well for that slice of the market. They're not like huge, never reaching anything like Call of Duty levels, but they're very solid, and they're able to fund their games and make money off of them, which is not actually super common.
No, I mean, Sniper Elite probably costs a millionth of what's Call of Duty makes, but I think they probably do pretty well with it, because it's just very well constructed, and it's hard. It's not like trying to blow you away with special effects or anything. It's just really fun, solid, incredibly replayable, which is why I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's always fun just to like snipe people from 2 miles away.
Yes.
You ever see that they have YouTube videos, just speaking of sniping people from a mile away, that old, he's a vet. I don't know if he's a Vietnam vet or whatever, but he plays Call of Duty or Battlefield, I'm not sure. And he makes YouTube videos, and he's an incredible sniper in these games. And he just calls out the distances and stuff like that. It's great. He's got to be in his 70s.
One of those guys.
Yeah.
Like one of those snipers where you're just like playing Warzone, and suddenly you get sniped from like...
like it's right across the map.
No, I'm going to get me. I was moving.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's great.
Meanwhile, I'm like, reload. I can't hit the thing.
Just pray and spray for me. That's it.
Yeah.
So, Eric, I guess I'll just start and we'll go like this. I don't want to tread common ground. I've sort of been doing a lot of homework on shows you've done, Ken, and I don't want to do the whole thing. How did you start? I think anyone that's followed you and is familiar with this stuff has, knows your story, but there are some things I'd like to ask and fill in along the way. Recently you were on Thomas Brush's show, and you laid out your whole background. I really enjoyed that podcast, by the way.
He's a great guy.
What's that?
He's a great guy. He's a developer, and I don't know if you played his demo of his new game. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. He's the real deal.
Yeah, he seems like a hard worker. I like his story, and I like his hustle. But one thing I was interested in your background story is, the failed screenwriter thing, I thought it was just funny, like I'd latch onto. But you walk into Looking Glass more or less, and right away you're working on System Shock. But Lost in the Shuffle there really was
Right away, I'm working on Thief. Sorry, Jason.
sorry, Thief leading on to System Shock, yes. And I know you had some really good mentorship, but what I'm curious about is what exactly you were hired for. Obviously writing, because you were in the film world and screenwriting, that effect. But when you were hired, like, what was your more or less title and what were you doing? I think and the reason I ask this is because a lot of people think of game development, think coding, animating, art, all these things. And yes, there's a lot of writers out there, but I don't think they see, oh, I'm this writer, I have this idea, and away I get hired. So that's sort of my first question.
So, I'm not a programmer. I don't know how to program. I haven't programmed anything since, well, actually on System Shock 2, I did some script programming, but that's not my area. I understand technology pretty well. Like I'm able to, I conceptually understand it well. I know what's most importantly, and I think this is good for any young developer. I know what's expensive in games to make and what's cheap, not just, cost, but also what's hard to render, what's easy to render. So I have a pretty good understanding of it, though I can't program a lick of it. I don't know why they hired me exactly. I'm guessing it because I had been, as you indicated, I had been a failed screenwriter. And at the time, there was a lot of, like The Seventh Guest and things like that, like full motion video games. And I think there was people thinking, oh, well, games are going to be sort of interactive videos, essentially. Because that's, like, that always happens at the beginning of any media, right? When they started making movies, it was like they filmed stage plays, right? That was what they thought they were going to be doing, basically, right? They didn't really, all that stuff about movies, about like a cut in time and space, a close up, pan, the whole visual language of movies had to be created. Nobody knew that up front. And then movies, once you realize what the visual language or the sort of narrative language of your medium is, all of a sudden your medium becomes unique and it takes on its own identity. Games, we're still figuring that. Well, we're still figuring that out. We can talk about that later. It's one of the things I love about games is we're still figuring out who the fuck we actually are and what actually we're doing. And that's not true in most media. Like novels don't know what they are. Games know, movies know what they are. TV shows know what they are. We don't. And I love that. But especially back then, this is 95. This is my 30th year in the industry. They brought me in to interview me. I don't know shit all about game development. I played a lot of games and I wrote some movies. And they liked me enough to bring me in. And I think they probably hired me because they wanted somebody who could write scripts, I would guess. But that wasn't the job I was immediately given. I was put on a Star Trek, like Sierra Adventure style game, a Star Trek Voyager Sierra Adventure, which never shipped. And I was put on, in a room with, as I've said many times, with this guy, Doug Church, and worked on the game that eventually became Thief.
So you were writing right out of the gate, and then slowly after that, Thief shifts. They like it enough. And
to be clear, we're working on Thief. It was mostly design. Like I came up with the sort of the setting and the characters. Garrett and and the trickster and the and Victoria and all those characters, but most of the work was design and then world, establishing, the world. And before we had Thief, we had multiple titles that we came up with, which never crystallized. But each time I had to come up with a setting and characters and a world, had to get concept art made. And I got very good at that because I had to come up with like 6 or 7 of them before we eventually settled on Thief.
So you were trusted more or less right out of the gate, design, write, lead, and we'll, collaborate on this and come to a finished idea. That's crazy. That's huge to hear. And then shortly after that, you're on System Shock, obviously.
Well, yeah, I don't know about the lead part, but I was sort of working just with Doug, and somebody had to go write the documents and come up with all this stuff because he was doing a bunch of other things like programming tasks. And so I did that. And then I stayed at that company for a while, and then we left and started our own Irrational games. And then we sort of made a deal with Looking Glass to come back together and work on System Shock 2 together.
Yeah, I have that. You were at Looking Glass about a year and a half. I sort of just looked at it. I'm very bold to branch out that quick. I assume you obviously learned a ton, trial by fire type stuff and forged amazing relationships. And you're like, I mean, a lot of balls to just say, you know what? Even though I've only been doing this a year and a half, I'm going to do my own thing at this point. Were you just confident that just was going to work? No, you just wanted to do it.
Well, okay. There's a combination of things. So I was a little older than most people at Looking Glass. I was about 30 at the time. I know I got in the games industry. I was 29. And I had been in the film industry, and I had my own, after my failed film career, I had been a computer consultant, a graphic designer. I had my own company, or my own company meaning me. Basically and I understood what it took. I knew what it was like to try to bill clients and get money out of them. And when they didn't pay you, what happened? And I sensed there was a lot of money troubles at Looking Glass. They had no creative challenges at all. They were incredibly amazing. But I can tell the money problems were coming. So I was like, I don't want to be the last one out the door. I want to be the first one out the door, because, and we left because I didn't think it was sustainable. I thought, okay, if we made the business practices a little more sustainable, and we took their design aesthetic, and the design aesthetics I was intimately connected with, and deeply loved, of sort of making these sort of immersive worlds. I thought we could do something and maybe survive in a world where I thought they were going to have challenges surviving. And it was very, very challenging. And listen, there was 100 times Irrational could have got out of business as well. You're constantly dodging these bullets. And so I think it was also a bit of arrogance. And, I was young, and I thought, well, I could fucking do this. And there were many times we almost went out of business. So I think, there was some youthful, arrogance there too, thinking we could do it in the way they couldn't on the business side.
Many things have been created with a "fuck it, I can do this" attitude. I mean, you kind of have to have just the blindness sometimes, because I'm my biggest enemy. So many great plans and ideas die on the vine of thought, or even backup plans. A backup plan's sometimes the worst enemy of your grand idea or dream. So
you need a bit of irrational exuberance about what you're doing, because the truth was the odds of us succeeding were so small. And we almost went out of business like right after we started Irrational, because we had a first project that got canceled like 30 days in. And Looking Glass reached out to us, and we did System Shock 2. And if they had it, who knows what would have happened? I'm deeply grateful to them. I'm deeply grateful to their founder, Paul Narath, and Doug Church, and everybody there. But we were so hungry when they contacted us about System Shock 2, and it's also getting handed your dream project to do. And it sucked in a million ways. We had no money, no time, but man, I love System Shock 1 so much. I'm getting handed a character like Shodan to be able to write. I was over the moon, but it was hard. It was hard. And, in probably like 9, it's like that thing at the end of Endgame, like in 15 million worlds, this wouldn't work out. And we got lucky. We're in the one where Irrational did work out.
Doctor Strange is giving you the one.
That's right.
And you left with two partners. Forgive me, I don't have their names off the top of my head.
John Shea and Robert Fermier.
Yeah, and I just a business question. Sometimes when you start a business, not sometimes, a lot of the times, a lot of people are naive and will figure it out on the fly. Like, what were your conversations like when you start this business? You're like, okay, here's my responsibility, here's your responsibility, here's yours, and let's tackle it this way. Or was it just messy and you guys figured it out on the fly?
No, we sort of looked at the range of stuff that had to be done, like who's going to do the taxes, and Rob or John or me would sort of raise our hand. I guess I'll do that. I don't know how to do it, but I'll do it. Who's going to be the manager of the project? And John raises his hand. John had never shipped a game before. I never shipped a game before. Rob is the only one who had shipped a game before, System Shock 2 and probably Terra Nova and maybe Underworld 2. And we all sort of took over, I'll take this boring job, you take that boring job. I became the business guy who would negotiate the deals, and I had no idea how to do that at the beginning. Got better over time, but I don't think I ever got great at it. And then you just figure out. I mean, I still remember I didn't have a car at this point. The first day where I'd quit Looking Glass, and I was going over to Rob's house to start the company. I got on my bike and I rode like 5 miles to his house. And the way I'm riding, biking over is the middle of the summer or spring, or it was hot. And I was like, how do you start a company? Like, what do you do? Like, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And we got there and we sort of looked at each other. It's like, okay, I guess we're starting the company today. Cool. And we figured it out. But we kissed, we really didn't know what we were doing. But that's, who does at the beginning?
Sure.
I mean, I think that's a huge thing with just any endeavor, is just that barrier to entry of just not knowing what it is you actually do, whether that's, how to get, a screenplay out to look at, or start a business, or code a game. Just that initial, like, how do I even do this thing is kind of the hugest stumbling block for a lot of people. And of course, people who, are raised in a family business or something, they don't have to worry about that as much, because they've kind of got that out of the way, or the whole nepotism thing's really helpful if you've got that.
I think that naivete, though, is a bit of it can be a benefit. Like, there's this term, I don't know if you guys know it. It's called the genius of the novice, which is like, because you don't have a lot of preconceptions. Sometimes you'll think of things that nobody else does, because everybody else, like, I've been in the games industry so long right now, I've got a million preconceptions.
Yeah.
And that can be a limiting factor, because, that can't work. And then, you have Notch or somebody comes along, right? And he's like, either he had no preconceptions or he just was able to dismiss them. I'm going to make this game in Java, and it's going to be about building mines and basically a dynamic Lego, digital Lego set that has some programming and some pigs and all this other stuff. And now it's like one of the largest franchises in the universe. But if somebody had told him, if he knew more, he may not have ever done it, because it sounds really stupid. But you do it. And I think we had a lot of those benefits early on of not knowing how dumb what we were doing was, what we were trying to do was. So that can be a shield. It could also be a problem.
So after System Shock 2 ships, how long after does Bioshock come into the picture?
Long time. System Shock 2 shipped in 99. Bioshock didn't ship till 2007.
7 years.
So you had a bunch of intermediate titles where we were really growing in our experience of how to make games, but they weren't. I think that of the games we did in that period, SWAT 4 was probably the best, which I literally had almost nothing to do. The team, I think, did an incredible job with that. Also Freedom Force, I thought, was really, really fun. I had more to do with that. But we just did a bunch of games, none of which did very well. One of the games never shipped. It was our first console game called Lost, and that was a huge catastrophe. Ended up like in a lawsuit. It was a rough time. And then Bioshock was really the thing that, turned it around. And I've always thought that, when young people, I talk to a lot of students and young people all the time, and I have open DMs, by the way, everybody. So if anybody ever wants to talk to me, I'm as far away as a DM on Twitter. And I talk to a lot of young people all the time. And you need three things to succeed. You need talent. You need perseverance. How do you stay when everything is fucked up and failing over and over and over again, and it's just problems? And you need luck. And if you have the talent and the perseverance, you'll be there when the luck comes around.
Yeah.
And it may take, for us, it took, let's see, we started the company in 2000, and it took 10 years for Bioshock. Since the start of the company, it was 10 years of failure. We had some critical success, but financial, like holding on by the skin of our teeth. And it was hard. It was so hard. And I would not want to go through it again. And we just happened to, our luck happened when because Bioshock was not our first good game. It was the first game that made any money. And then life gets a little easier. You get new problems at that point, different kinds of problems.
Bioshock came out at a really interesting time. For me, so Bioshock came out the same year that my first child was born, which really cut into my ability to play many games. But right around that time was I felt like such a great time for gaming in general, those years in there. And that's when I started building PCs and really getting into PC gaming for the first time. And, Half-Life 2 and Fear and all the, Oblivion. And all these games were coming out before Bioshock. But Bioshock was one of those titles that I just remember just feeling like, wow, this is really unique. This is really different from anything else that I've played before.
I don't know what you think, Eric, but my sense is that the industry, it didn't exactly know how to make a successful title. So the successors were like, oh my God, let's do Half-Life or Team Fortress. And it wasn't like, okay, we need to monetize this, to death. There was a lot more chances, especially in the AAA space. There were chances being taken, which there's almost no chances being taken in AAA right now.
Right.
And because the costs were also much, like Bioshock is, much cheaper than the titles you've done subsequently. Because the competitive space goes up, people's expectations go up, and then you have most of the innovation now happening in the indie space because it's so expensive in the AAA space now. But back then, you could still take some risks in the AAA space or the AA space at least.
Yeah, and you'd see new IP all the time, rather than just like remakes and the 12th entry in this or that game. And games were looking back, like I've been thinking a lot about the upcoming Grand Theft Auto, GTA 6, and game like GTAs used to come out pretty frequently back then. You'd get and they would be radical. For a while they were pretty radically different than before, and just felt like it feels like games have definitely just the whole nature of the industry has really shifted in recent years. But that was a good time for gaming back around 2007, and really, in between those years and Bioshock Infinite's release, I felt like there was still a lot of really great stuff, and it was a little easier to the one thing about the indie space that drives me crazy now is there's just so much. There's so many games that are coming out in the indie space that I just cannot keep track of anything anymore.
Yeah, but how lucky are we that we have, like, unlike movies, we have a really vibrant space that's creating a lot of innovation. Like, I'm grateful for that because I love games and I play so much. There's so many indie games that come along that are, at very least, we're checking out. If not, and there's so much innovation happening.
I find out about a lot of them.
Well, that's I always say that, sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
You're good. I was just saying I find out about a lot of these games just because it is so hard to keep up with what's what's new and what's popular, especially with younger people. And I find out about a lot of them from my son and what he and his friends are playing. And it's so interesting to me also because what they're playing is often not the kind of games that are making, they're in the AAA space at all. Like they could care less about the new Dragon Age game. They could care less about all that stuff, but they are playing these weird, funky games that I've never heard of before. And they look, the graphics aren't great. The whole, that's very different when I was younger, when you were kind of looking for the next big game, the next big thing. And that was exciting. And I don't know. It just feels like there's been a real shift.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to delve too much, but it does make me worry about the future of the industry in that way, especially like you're talking about how expensive AAA is and the chances that they're not taking, and this new generation not really gravitating to these games like how our generation did, and like Ken's did. Ken, you're a little older than us, but both of us are in our mid 40s, so same. And it always kills me. Like, we talk about the industry in that capacity, but you always hear the chatter about, they want so much innovation out of AAA. And I'm like, listen, the innovation's happening in the indie space. You need to broaden your horizon for the games, your palette, so to speak. And it's not being a snob. That's just, there's so many games. And it also leads into my other big complaint. You see this often from the, gaming in the modern age sucks, which is just the way everyone talks now. It's either the best or it's the worst. But, games used to be so much better. I'm like, I've basically been playing games since they've more or less started on consoles. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm the most pessimistic person there is. Gaming, in most ways, has never been better in terms of the breadth, the quantity, the styles and genre, the tools to create. I mean, that's fostered its own issues, of course. Sometimes there's too much, and great games, similar to Sniper Elite, like Ken was talking of, that ilk, they can fall through the cracks when they really shouldn't. But I mean, that's not for us to figure out, more or less. But I mean, I couldn't be happier with video games. I play with my limited time as much indie games as I can. And the ones I don't play, I buy anyway, because I just like to support them. And, that's where I'm looking for the innovation. Sure, I'd like, every game that comes along to offer me something new. But sometimes the greatest things are iterations, not pure innovations.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric. I was just gonna say, have either of you played Split Fiction yet?
It's incredible.
Isn't that
I have not.
Oh my god,
Still full of ideas. It's just bursting with ideas.
just constantly. I've been playing that with my daughter, and every new stage, every new area, I'm just like, I just turn to her and I'm like, can you believe this? Can you believe how creative this is? It's just, there's something new and exciting and fun, and that's the kind of game. That's how I felt when I was younger playing games. I think maybe I've gotten it's been a little harder for me to focus on. I've moved to TV a lot more, and I've focused a little less on games. But this is that kind of game that I'm just like, whoa, this is so cool. I love that feeling,
I think games are still in I think it's AAA less so. There are still some really cool AAA games coming out, absolutely. And it's the companies that can afford to take risks. Like, I'm sure GTA is going to have a ton of innovation in it, a ton of interesting things in it. And, Take-Two's been very generous with us and giving us the time we need to try to innovate, and not just make, something that at least, who knows, if, you never know if your game is going to be good, but at least, it's not going to be just like every other game, because you've given the time to make all those mistakes, and learn from your mistakes, which is very hard to do if you're like an annualized development cycle or something like that. But I'm also very happy with the games industry, and look, there's lots of problems, but in terms of as a gamer,
yeah,
I'm getting lots of great games to play. I never have a shortage of interesting things to try. And if you think there's not interesting stuff to try, I would really encourage people to spend some time on Steam and look at the various events they have and the demos that you can get. Like right now, I'm opening my Steam account. I've got Malura demo, the Altars demo, Clover Pit demo, and these are just this weekend I'm going to play. Skin Deep demo, all these interesting games. And look, some of them will, some of them be interesting, some of them won't, and some of them will become probably my obsessions for several months, and some of them I'll never think about again. But man, that's amazing that you can do that.
It just really bothers me when people just seem to be so negative about something they proclaim to love. And listen, critique is natural. I'll listen all day long, but I just find I don't really have much time for people who really crap all over the industry from a gamer standpoint. I'm not talking about the business. That's a different case, but just and gaming has never been more accessible, from sale to, I mean, God, when we grew up, like, games were so expensive, they were hard to get. I would read Game Fan about all these games from Japan that would never come here, and I would just wish that they would. And I didn't have access to ROMs then, like you do now, or things of that. And the sales, like, how can I pick up 5 games that used to be $70 a year and a half, 2 years from release, and it cost me a grand total of $35? You know what I mean? Like, that didn't exist, and we take it for granted.
It's a golden age, but you can't tell people I remember in the 90s, like, all I have is a Macintosh, and a new good Macintosh game would come out every 6 months, maybe, if you're lucky, right? Sure. Eric, you had it, sort of?
It's horrible.
And now every day I can check Steam and try to find something new and cool to play. And sometimes it's this amazing game and it's on sale and it's like $4. But if you didn't live in those lean times, it's kind of hard to convey how lucky people have it now. Look, to some degree, a customer's gonna feel the way the customer feels. You can't tell them they're wrong. You just have to try to give them what they want.
Louis C.K. has also a bit. Everything's awesome and no one's happy. Sorry, Eric.
Yeah, I remember that bit. No, there's so much that goes into it, because of course there have been many disappointments for gamers over the years as well. Franchises that they love that they feel like have gone in a direction that they don't love, and we saw that a lot with the new Dragon Age game, which had plenty of things going for it, I thought, but certainly was a huge departure from earlier Dragon Age games, and of course there was a long wait in between. So there's lots of things, and then gamers have had to contend with pretty crappy monetization practices and
patches and things of that. Like, I get that. Yeah.
Just a lot of stuff. And so it is just the nature of being online, being chronically online, that you just sort of, if you have a problem, you gravitate towards other people in forums and social media that have problems. So people who aren't online all the time, they're just having fun, although they probably don't get exposed to as much good stuff either. So
there's a yin and yang to everything, Eric. Like, the industry got bigger and all of a sudden there's a ton more games, but then the market got more sophisticated in the way that you can look at different monetization schemes. Some, like I don't play a lot of multiplayer games, right? I'm almost entirely a single player gamer. So, that's not, so I'm not going to benefit from the free to play. Like, I mean, if we had something like Fortnite that was free to play, like in the 90s, oh my God, we would have lost our minds,
Yeah.
But now people can look at that and be cynical about it because, and I understand it, like, they weren't around in the 90s where there's just nothing, nobody was handing out anything for free gaming wise in the 90s, right? Everything. You bought a Street Fighter game and it was $70 in 1990s money on your SNES. I think I had the right number. It was 60 or 70. It was some very large amount of money, which was, probably equivalent to almost, I don't know how much, $200.
Just to add to that, Ken, I'm Canadian. Phantasy Star 2, my parents bought that. That was $120.
Canadian, but that's like 50 cents, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
No money at all.
Yeah, like our dollar right now is worth like 68 cents. So
is it really that low?
Say again?
Is it really that low now? 68 cents?
Yeah, listen, we're not going to start with my candid opinion here. Stick to the games. Our own election coming up, by the way. So
there's always, look, no time is perfect, but and you can't convince somebody if they're not happy that they should be happy. But I can tell you, looking at the long arc of time, it is a pretty good time to be a gamer. Just the amount of hours you can play games and not pay a penny for it is unprecedented. But I get it. And there's no big sales like there. Steam sales are amazing. And there's really cool stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I still remember when Steam first launched and how cool that was.
Yep.
There wasn't much on it, but it was just great to have. Like, that's what I played, Counter-Strike and Team Fortress 2 and all those titles a bunch. And that was a good time. Now Steam is just crazy. I have such a huge backlog. I will never play all the games I want to play. So that is a good problem to have.
It's a rich man's problem, as they call it. Yeah, I probably have, I don't know, several thousand. I don't know how many thousand games I have on Steam.
Ooh, the Steam summer sale. Let me just buy this and this.
Yeah, I buy everything.
That looks cool. And it's
time for. But yeah, moving back to and that's why really when Bioshock came out, that PS3 360 generation, it's funny. The PS3 had a myriad issues. It ran clunky. The 360 seemed to be firing on all cylinders too. But it seemed to be the last generation where there were these new ideas in the AAA space and people were still trying all these new things at the highest level. It's odd. I look back at it. It might be my favorite era overall of gaming. I mean, sure, I love my SNES RPGs and, the Genesis, and we move forward. I love different things about all of them, but I look back to the PS3 360 gen and I'm like, that might be it for all of its scars and stuff like that. But
it was
that's
a good
when
time.
Bioshock came out.
Bioshock, Demon Souls.
Yeah,
sure.
Was Demon Souls PS3 era or was it? Yeah, it was PS3 era, right?
Yeah, and Dark Souls too. Demon Souls was 2009, so
it was late PS3. No,
PS3.
It was
sort of mid PS3, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, mid PS3.
Yeah, I remember buying it day one and being like, "What the fuck is this?"
I started with Dark Souls, and I bought that game right before I had my vasectomy. What
a great analogy! Oh my god,
not a sentence. Yeah.
I finally had like a couple days where I didn't have to do any parenting stuff, and I just played Dark Souls for like the whole time. And at one point, my wife at the time moved my Xbox, and it scratched the disc. And I was like, "You need to go to the store and get another copy right now. Like, I cannot be left here without Dark Souls." But that was a great era. Now everyone just copies Dark Souls, and we've talked about this on this podcast before.
Yeah,
it's
we have.
All the action games are trying to do what Dark Souls does.
Yeah, it's one of my big qualms while respecting what it does.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just going to move it back to Bioshock. Just some quotes from you. Bioshock, as you say, it was a commentary on linearity overall. And then when you were all finished, you ultimately wanted to move away from the series. You felt trapped by the franchise's success when it was all said and done. That was something you said on Sacred Symbols, by the way, with Colin. We're big fans of Colin here. So I guess with BioShock continuing without you, although nothing's announced, like, how does it feel knowing you created this thing that's global? Like I told you a story about in the Bahamas. I'm sure you've heard many others. I live in a small town of Paris, Ontario, and I walk down the street and there was someone with a stuffed Big Daddy on their porch, and I had to go walk up to them. So here's this series, this thing you created, and now it's no longer yours in the proverbial sense, and it's going to continue. How do you feel about that?
Look, I'm very lucky that I was an artist for many years before anybody cared about anything I made. And until I was 40, basically, nobody really cared. There are a few people, and I appreciate all the fans, Shock 2 and Thief and Freedom Force and SWAT 4. But then, you do something that reaches, millions of people, or tens of millions or hundreds of million people. And it's kind of hard to, do the math in your head of what that actually is, that how many people have experienced the work. I'm very grateful that people like it. Of course, and I understand how lucky I am that people like it. The main thing for me is I would just want to continue making stuff. So anything that contributes to my ability to go to work every day and work on video games, it's a charmed life. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that. Because I don't really see myself ever retiring. And the fact that people are waiting for stuff that we're doing, that people will pay me to do this stuff, is just, it enables the life I want, which is the life of being able to go create interesting stuff. And especially in games, because I've made comic books, I've made plays, I've written movies. My favorite thing about games is nobody understands exactly what they are yet. And to continue to sort of try at least to innovate and to do different things is, and get paid for that, is very rare and very exciting. But, in terms of BioShock, you really can't sort of, it's not like theater. Like when I did theater, you would put on a play or I'd be in the play sometimes, and you get to do that punchline and hear people laugh. You don't really have anything exactly like that in games. So it's a bit more removed. So I never had the experience of connecting to an audience experience the way I did when I was doing theater. And I kind of like to do theater again someday because of that. So you are a little removed from the process. So I don't say I have a huge insight into what it's like to the audience to play the game. They tell me afterwards, but and now assume you get to see it sometimes, but it's not the same as theater, though I'm incredibly grateful that I get to continue to make this stuff.
Did you ever, was it tricky walking away from BioShock? Did you think maybe we should do another game? There's a huge setting and just huge leap between BioShock and BioShock Infinite. Obviously, very different setting, very different in a lot of ways. Did you ever think, okay, we should make another one in a new setting? Or were you like, okay, I think this is done. I'm done with this. I want to go in a different direction. What was the sort of struggle there?
I didn't feel I had a really good idea of what to do next. And the last thing I wanted to do is spend years of my life and ask people for, a bunch of money to make a game that I didn't really know what to do. And I think there were younger people who had a big idea, right? And so the guys working on BioShock 4, are very enthusiastic and they're really into it. And I think they love what they're doing. And I'm super excited just to be able to play it. But I already felt on Infinite. I already was aware that I was so aware of the success of BioShock when I was making BioShock Infinite that I felt you can't help but have an influence the work you're doing, and you're always trying to one up yourself and do something bigger and better. And I don't think that was a great employee. This is the most fortunate, the fact that I got to get funding to do something different. It was amazing, but I already was worried that I would just be in this endless cycle of trying to make to outdo myself And I didn't think that was a great place, at least for me and my brain state, to be at. And I'm incredibly lucky that, Take-Two would be like, hey, you want to do something different? Okay, we'll fund that. Not everybody gets that. So I'm aware, like, I'm not criticizing anybody for staying on a franchise because, well, some people may not have that sort of sense of self-competition. And it wasn't really good for me, that self-competition. It wasn't a super happy time because I was mostly because of me.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to, along the lines of what you're talking about, there was an interview shortly before Infinite release or right at the tail end. And I know you shared some of your mental struggles and hurdles at that time on previous podcasts, Sacred Symbols. And there was a quote that stuck out to me in that interview. You kind of seemed disheartened. And I'm just going to paraphrase the quote. It was like, we wanted the game to be great, but oh well, pencils down. And that just, it seemed to some, it's funny looking back because I think Infinite was absolutely incredible. And I can't put myself in your shoes at all. It seemed like a trying dev cycle outside looking in. And you, like I said, you've spoken on what really your mindset was during that time, but excuse me, I guess, would that sum up why you walked away from it?
Yeah, I was not in a good mental state at that point. I was, had some OCD issues. I had a bunch of problems, and I wasn't really in a position to be leading a massive team of people because that's a huge stressor. But I think I'm happy with the game, and I know Booker and Elizabeth, and building that world was really cool. I've just been happier on Judas than I was on Infinite. A lot happier. And again, like, it's a function of, also trying to do something that, and look, it could have been the dumbest move I ever made to walk away from BioShock, right? Not many people get to build a franchise that's successful. And it's pretty arrogant to think, like, I'm just going to go away and do that again. Like, who knows, right? You never know. Like Judas, maybe nobody will care. But I wanted to do something different. And I was lucky that I financially, was in a reasonably good place myself. And so I could take some risk at that point, which I never could do before. I never really could take risks before because I was always worried about, feeding my family.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yep.
Very important. And I can just tell you, people are definitely going to care about Judas. And that's not just blowing smoke. I mean, the hype is real, and I'm sure you feel the pressure to deliver on that. And it's great to hear that your mindset isn't the same. Obviously, I don't know you, Ken. I don't presume to know you, but it looks like the dev cycles are similar between Judas and what Infinite was. But great things do take time. And, the fact that you're in a good mindset, speaks great for you and your team and also for the game when it comes out.
Yeah, it's a much happier team, and I'm in a much better place. And, the team, having a really unhappy team is every game development is rough. And I'm not saying Judas doesn't have its serious challenges to make it, but the team is pretty motivated and pretty happy. And we all have a bit of a mission we're on, and we all get what the mission is. So we're all pretty excited.
I thought I remember there was, like with most games, there was controversy around the release of Infinite. But I remember I went to LA, and that's where I met you for the first time for the Infinite preview, and playing that first segment where Booker comes out into the Cloud City. That's still one of those cool moments in gaming for me. Just like one of those, wow, holy shit moments. And I also really, really enjoyed that game. And at the time was a little disappointed when I heard you were not coming back to BioShock again, because I was like, no, I want another one of these. He's great. But Judas, what can you tell us about Judas? Like, what is this like? What's the elevator pitch? What's the what can we look forward to here that you're allowed to talk about?
So the sort of the genesis for Judas actually came from BioShock Infinite. We got to a point of development in BioShock Infinite where I was like, what if Elizabeth could be like, look at Booker, who's been killing like, a billion people a minute in that game. I was like, I think you're a monster. I'm not going any further with you. And what if the player had different abilities to play the game differently and get a different reaction out of her? And at the time I thought of this, I thought of it. I got all excited. And I'm like, there's literally no tools you have in this game to do anything like that. It's entirely linear. You have a story. That story can change. Where else are you going to go? Like, is there another character like Elizabeth, who you can go and work with instead, who will accept those things about you? And at that point, I just followed away. I said, well, that's not going to happen on this game. And I had already done that commentary in Bioshock 1 about the linearity of games, with the Would You Kindly moment. And I was like, well, is this a problem that could be addressed? And this is the problem of how do you recognize player actions? I think also the game Shadow of Mordor had come out at that time, which is not really a narrative-heavy game, but was very, very good at recognizing player action. And like, I don't know if you haven't played it, like you could light an orc on fire, and later on, like he'll come back at you and he'll be all burnt up, and he'll be like, "You burned me alive, motherfucker," or whatever orc version of that is,
or gain resistance to it, or something to that effect.
Gain resistance, yep. And he'll
system in that game.
And if you kill his rival, he'll rise in the sort of orc crime family that you have vision of. And I was really, I don't think anybody's topped that yet. But it's not a very character oriented game, and I tend to make very like big, deep characters. I'm like, could you make a game where you're really trying to simulate the player's relationship with several characters and really have that feel grounded and have them react to you and comment on what you do, respond to what you do on a fairly granular level? Can they remember things? Can you have things like dynamic continuity where, because like if you think about movies, one of the most important things in movies, and the movies have really, for some reason, forgotten all about this in the past 10 years, is setup and payoff, right? You set up something early in the story and then that pays off later. Characters remember what you did and like, well, you killed my mom, so I'm going to betray you. Like all these things that, is there a way you can construct a system that is very simulated rather than, like a branching tree structure that you have in most games, and really can remember a large variety of player actions and not create big macro branches that are hard coded, but much more modular approach where you're sort of quantizing everything down to what is the smallest state that we can represent this idea. Sometimes it's we don't use, it's not like Minecraft where you have voxels representing, individual voxels that you make a table out of, a table, a sentence of a dialogue, an enemy type, a treasure, all these things. And you have a system that could watch player action and then fuse together small little elements, whether to make a room, whether to make an encounter, whether to make a dialogue between the player and another character that is constructed at runtime that is highly reflective of what the player has done and the experience they've had. And that, and I gave a talk about it. If people are curious about it, I did a talk on narrative Lego 10 years ago, and we are, not everything there is being done, but the fundamental structure is very much intact of how we're building this game. And Judas allows you to play this character. And, our goal is that this feels like one of our games. Perhaps you can tell visually, we have a certain visual style, and that applies, this is a science fiction game, but we've done other games before. I tend to have an exaggerated style. I think that works well for the kinds of stories I tell, with a social political context, but a fantastical over the top setting. That where this time, instead of like you're just working for, Atlas or Elizabeth or Comstock or whatever it is, you really have a choice about which way am I going with these different characters, but not really focused on character interaction and ending up with very different dynamics between the characters depending on how you play. And that was our focus, and that's what we've been working on.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
It sounds complicated. It sounds like a hard thing to make work. A lot of moving pieces.
Some things came very, very easily. Some things we're still putting the final touches on, figuring out exactly how they work. But it's all has this modular approach, and it is our first game on it. And we have a tool set now we built on top of the Unreal Engine, which is very, very powerful. And we'll bring it to whatever we do next. But I never want to build a game the old way again, because this allows, one thing the system allows is just us to, we built a level in Bioshock Infinite that we didn't have time to finish. And so we cut it. But we had to then stitch the story. Imagine taking like an hour out of a movie, right? Or 2 hours out of a movie. You have to stitch a story together. And you see this a lot now with movies that have been reshot and reshot and reshot, and they're a disaster sometimes. So you can see where they, they've tried to fuse things together and where they reshot scenes, or they do ADR to add lines that nobody actually said in the scene, so you have exposition. I can move scenes around dynamically, like just by changing numbers now. I can change orders of events around dynamically by moving numbers around and, moving spreadsheets behind the scenes. And like right now we're doing a test, and it's really about the pacing of a very big narrative concept in the game, which is really about what is the result of these relationships you're having with these characters? How does that really play out, and how does that dynamically change? And you end up with very, very different places with the characters depending on what you do. And sometimes characters who you've been friends with become your deep antagonist, and that's very dynamic. And we're now doing a big test on that. But one thing we're looking at is the pacing of the drama. And the nice thing is we're doing a ton of testing. And as we get user feedback, this is too fast, this is too slow. We don't have to go massively reconstruct things. We sort of change the pacing of events that spawn dynamically in an incredibly powerful way. And again, we're not the first people. I want to be clear. I think Mortar was the guy's first tapping on this door. Even their orcs are constructed modularly. Their lines, if you look at them, they're all basically a bunch of art assets that can put together by the system. We're just trying to really bring it to new character development with that. And as well as make a great first person shooter with lots of, emergent environment stuff. And, it's from a gameplay standpoint, it's much closer to Bioshock 1 than Bioshock Infinite in terms of environmental interactions and things like that. And how you interact with AIs and the different approaches you can take to combats. But, we're very excited about it. I mean, that have to be, because I've been working on it for like 10 years already. So I'm still, every morning I wake up, I'm excited to go to work.
That's great. I hope we all have that. You haven't done a formal preview cycle for Judas yet. So I was scrounging for information and things that people were talking about. I was surprising how little for as much hype around Judas, and of course anything you make, Ken, is going to have that. I think the average gamer out there knows very little about what Judas is going to be right now, but I have heard some people. I think Games Media got access to roughly a 5-hour demo of the game, and I listened to some people talk about it. And what I garnered from Judas was it is definitely a Ken Levine style game. You have your Rapture Columbia setting is the Mayflower the ship? Is that the name? Yeah. And that acts as the setting, which is, your settings are characters in and of themselves. I know that's a cliche to say, but it is true. And I guess correct me if I'm wrong, the term that I heard, your game is like a rogue-lite. Would that be an accurate assessment? Because this was...
I'm in a really awkward position now. I can't remember what I said in that interview, and I don't want to
No, I will say that you did not say this. Someone at GameSpot said this. So after playing your 5-hour demo.
I'll say this. So it wasn't, by the way, just to be clear, I was when we first did the demo for Bioshock Infinite, we didn't really know much about the game. We were sort of putting it out there and see what people thought. And we got a fan reaction. It's like, this wasn't really the game you ended up shipping. And we try to listen to that. And so I wanted this time not just to go out with a bunch of fancy, throwaway demos or a CGI trailer. I really want to just put the game in people's hands, that people trusted, whether it's, like Ryan at IGN or the Skill Up or Jeff Keighley, people who aren't me, right, who have no reason to particularly like me or, support me. But I wanted them to be able to play the game and have honest conversations about it, because it is out there. And I don't want to just go out and I was trying not to go out there and just be like, let me tell you about this amazing game and tell you a billion things about it. So that's why we haven't talked much about it, because we really want the game to be fairly close to done before we really start doing a heavy press push. Mm-hmm. And we're getting there. I'm not going to talk about dates or anything, but we're definitely getting there. And the game is really coming along. And we're very lucky we have that ability. And the fact that we've had Bioshock and people are looking forward to the game, that gives us an advantage. So I don't have to do the thing as much before, where I'm constantly out hyping it up and flying around and, doing press interviews. Sorry, just turn this phone off. I hit all the wrong buttons.
It's okay. It's fine.
So I wanted to try to really get it in front of people as an honest piece of code in development rather than some fancy, vertical slice. And we're fortunate that nobody's forcing us to do anything differently. But yeah, it very much feels like one of our games. I'll say that, but it's very much very different from our other games in a couple of areas. One is the game loop, like you described, and we have the loop is heavily narrative inflected, and I'm not going to talk much about that now because I actually told the guys, all the people who came out for that piece, that they could talk about it, and they didn't want to because they didn't want to spoil it for the gamer. And I got to say, I really appreciated that because, look, scoops are very valuable, right? And they all 5 of them, all the people who went out, and that was Jake Baldino, that was Lucy James, and that was Skill Up, and that was Ryan, and that was Jeff. They all gave up the scoop because they wanted people to be surprised by what that loop looks like and how it feels. And everything we do is heavily narratively inflected. So, you play this woman Judas on the ship, and on the spaceship in the future, and there's a very surprising aspect of the story that people don't know about, which is going to be take you in a very different place in that loop. And I was pretty amazed that they weren't going to talk about it, and they didn't want to talk about it because they wanted to protect the gamers counter. Now I'm really thinking, like, how do I talk about it in a way that doesn't spoil it for people? Because it's one of the parts this part of the game is very close to me in my life. And it's so important to me, and I really want it to be important to people. And I was very gratified that they, on their own, said, we told them they could talk about it, and they didn't, because they want it to be special for people. And you don't get that in a lot of industries, I don't think. I really walked away from that pretty moved by that reaction they had.
Yeah, that is cool.
Lucy's. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead. No, sorry. Yeah.
No, guy. I'm just making a joke about games journalists.
Oh yeah, we can make many jokes.
Well, there's good one in every industry, but these were 5 of the good ones, I'd have to say.
Yes, the interview I'm quoting was specific from Lucy, and she was trepidatious and respectful, but also extremely informative in her interview. And she stressed that it was not a preview event. So, but the roguelite aspect, she said, but it's a roguelite in that there is some procedural generation and levels, but also a roguelite in the narrative. And I think that's sort of what you're alluding to without obviously giving details in, and certain aspects of characters could be sorry, go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
It's a huge, interesting narrative aspect of the game. It's not just like it has mechanical aspects of that, but it's also, I don't think anybody's done anything quite like this from a narrative perspective. And I don't want to overblow it because I don't want to be like, pump it up, but it's something that's very near and dear to my heart and my life, that aspect of the game. So I'm so excited for people to see it, but it has to be the right time.
Yeah, I can feel it. You just talking about it. I mean, that's natural for someone that created this thing, and it's been almost 10 years. But I mean, this is great.
I think once you see it, especially people who are, been around as long and playing games for as long as we have, I think you'll understand right away why I'm so attached to it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds uniquely like something uniquely the games can do that isn't, there's so often games can feel like they're trying too hard to mimic what films do, or, the narrative style of something more linear and set in stone, and not taking advantage of the medium in a way that they could be. Or they do that simply through mechanics, but not through storytelling. So it sounds really cool. I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, Eric, you're completely right. That one thing that games, we've made big fancy cutscenes. We have these conversations all the time in the writers' room on Judas, that we have very dynamic systems. We also, the game starts off in a fairly traditional manner. It starts off linear. And then, after an hour or two, it sort of really breaks off and you see what the game can do. But the setup and the exposition is sort of a very traditional sequence where you're on the Mayflower, you learn this colony ship that's orbiting Proxima Centauri with the last human survivors on board, and the robots have gone crazy and taken over the ship, and you find out you're responsible for that, and you're this very morally compromised character, and you have these interactions with these three robots who used to run the ship and who basically read as humans, and they're all very messed up people, and you're a messed up person, and it's all about like which one of these three you're going to form a relationship with, where which one of these you're going to trust, which ones you're going to distrust, and you really drive that experience. But I think that I do think that the what games do well is the player is part of it, right? And this whole game is about how do we get the player to be part of it. So I really enjoyed writing the more linear aspects of the game. There are some of that, there is some of that, but by far the most interesting part is the stuff that reacts to the player on a fairly low level. And that's the part which we're sort of, as we got sort of the skeleton of things down, we're now really heavily focused on like these huge, much more dynamic narrative arcs that are so exciting to write, because you got to get yourself in this sort of brain space of the possibility space of drama, not just a drama that goes from here to there. And that's very gamer driven. And I've never had to do that before. And it's both very scary, but also super exciting, because at the end of the day, I don't think the future of games is sitting back and watching cutscenes. And by the way, I want to be clear. I think I support all kinds of games. I think everybody should make their passion. I don't think there's a right way to make games and a wrong way to make games. I say for me, when I'm thinking about the future, I'm thinking it's getting the player to a space, let them be somebody they're not, and let them have as little barrier to being that person as you can. That's a really hard problem, right? And that's not going to go away with Judas. But we're trying to make a little step in that direction. And I'd rather go in that direction than the other direction and just do more bigger cutscenes. So we have no shortage of great, sort of events like that, especially the opening of the game. But to me, the really interesting part is when the player gets to express themselves and have the game react to that and recognize it. That's the part that interests me.
Mm-hmm. You talked earlier about, you're not a coder, but you recognize, what things cost to make. We recognize what's expensive. I know like big fancy cutscenes are pretty expensive. How is this like developing a game this way? It sounds like you've made some progress just on the technical side with efficiency, with being able to, like you were just talking about, being able to rearrange things or change the pacing. That sounds like a step forward just in terms of sort of cost efficiency as well, just time and money.
That's a big goal of the project. So there is like this product will cost more than the next product, because the tool set we can amortize the tool. It's like building an engine, right? We built this narrative engine essentially that spawns all types of content in the game depending on player action. That took a long time, and we're still not quite done with it. We're still adding, the final pieces of it. But the next game, and we had to figure out what that was too, right? I had a bunch of ideas. The modularity idea is persistent and has been since the beginning. But how we express that, some things were very quick. Some things took a lot longer. Some things were still, as I said, putting the final finishing touches on, figuring it out. But the next game, and even that all said, I think we're going to be one of the cheapest AAA games out there to make. It's not a cheap game to make, and it's not something that an indie studio can do. We're very lucky to have the support of Take-Two. But it was not on the cost structure of some of these games you hear about. They're just, $500 million or something. I think for the next game, it's going to be, we're going to be able to start with this set of tools, and we're going to understand how they work. And hopefully, and that's why I talked about it 10 years ago. Ideally, you don't see a lot of games that sort of live in this sort of immersive simi type space now, because they've been marginally successful, but they get more and more expensive to make, right? So, amazing studios like Arcane Austin get shut down because the cost, and they try to have them make a game which wasn't totally in their, it was a multiplayer. It was their first multiplayer live service game. And I played it to start to finish. I played Redfall to start to finish, but the studio didn't survive because people are trying to make those economics work. And we fortunately got to hire a huge number of people from Arcane. But one thing I said when they were interviewing it here is that we're not just trying to make this, we want to show that you can give more player agency at a lower development cost once you have these ideas tested out. And I hope I think that's going to be the case. And I'm going to be talking more about the game and how we did it afterwards, so people can hopefully benefit from, learn from our mistakes and learn from our, learn from the smart things we did as well.
That's cool.
Now I would love to get into the business economics, but we only have so much time here. Hopefully we can have you back to talk about all that stuff once Judas is out. I'm curious, what a lighter thing I know in Judas that was released, that one of your companions is like a big dog, and he was inspired from your own dog. Is that accurate? We love dogs, right, Eric?
Yeah, I've got 3 dogs.
Yes, yeah. And I just lost mine.
I'm sorry. What kind of dog was it?
A Rottweiler. His name is Bane.
Bane? I'm
Bane.
Sorry. Sorry. That must be terrible. I'm sorry.
It is, and I don't want to talk about it because I'll cry. But
Totally get it.
and we've talked about it enough. But yeah, I like this big dog shepherds you from area to area is another snippet. It just stood out to me. I'm like, that just sounds great. I love dogs. Dogs in games never gets old. Hopefully you can pet them.
You can. There's a lot.
There you go. Quick gift from Game Night. You can pet the dog.
You can pet the dog. Look, I never had a dog when I was a kid. And my wife and I fought about getting a dog for like 15 years. And then finally 10 years ago, she just sort of put her foot down. It's like, fine. And then I'm the guy now watching dog rescue videos at 2 a.m. And that's the last person I thought I'd be. And I wanted to, there's a lot of me, and there's a lot of my, it's all through the lens of metaphor. And obviously Kirby's not a giant, 8-ton robotic dog, but that dog is a pain in the ass in the way that dogs are, right? That's they're agents of chaos, dogs. And what dogs taught me is that you can't control your life too much, right? And there's a joy in that chaos. And, there's a whole conversation in the game between Judas and another character where the character's like, why would you make a dog that is a robot dog that doesn't obey you and is constantly making trouble for you? And I was like, and Judas is trying to explain to her why that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Judas, who also doesn't interact well with people, just, has some social skills problems. And dogs are another great thing about that. They don't lie to you. You know exactly what they're on about. They don't, they try to manipulate a little bit, but you can always see through it. And they just are who they are. And then all the, but even fear of losing the dog and the pain of losing a dog. Like, these are all things that we're trying to explore with the dog. He's not like a dog who's going to go and like solve all your problems for you. He's kind of the opposite. And I want to show why that was amazing and why a character like Judas is sort of genius would make a robot that doesn't obey her.
I love that.
Oh,
that's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
In past games like Bioshock Infinite, balancing the narrative against the gameplay itself, the first person shooter aspect, is I'm sure that's always a challenge. How about here in this new format with this new kind of narrative structure, balancing that out against the first person shooter stuff? Like, what kind of challenges go into that?
Great question. So hard. So in Bioshock, in Bioshock Infinite, we would literally place everything. All the narrative events happen at a certain point. Audio logs are trickier because we didn't know when the player was going to play them. We knew where they picked them up. So we try to move things away, not put them near the combats, right? So you wouldn't be, like overwhelmed, and and still there was some overlap there because we weren't separating out the narrative bits to like cutscenes where the game stopped. Now we have to do everything systemically. Like we can dynamically place narrative events away from combats, but how far away from combats? If you place it too far away from combat, you may have a big dead space that you don't really want, right? But if you place it too close, you may have the characters overlapping and talking over combat. It looks kind of dumb, and the player's like, well, their attention gets drawn in too many places. It's a hard problem, but we have a lot of tools in the game to try to, to curate that experience so you don't have those overlaps, but also just pacing. Like, how do you dynamically generate narrative pacing so it feels as good as any other story you've seen? You really have to understand, like, okay, what's an action beat? What's an upbeat? What's a downbeat? When do you need silence? When do you need music? When do you need a whole note rest? Right? How does the tension build? How does it climax? How does it then go to a denouement? How does it start building again? We really made a huge study of existing art forms, like movies, 3-act structures. TV shows like Judas is probably the closest thing structurally, is more like a television show where you have a bunch of scenes playing out with different characters. Game of Thrones is probably a good reference point, not in terms of like, we're not a fantasy game, but a bunch of different scenes that advance, and you're sort of going from, well, Judas is always in the scene, right, in our game, but in those games, you'd be with Arya, and you'd be with the Hound, and then you'd be with Jaime Lannister and Brienne, and you're watching all these interesting stories, and they're sort of mixing together to make a larger story. That then sometimes those stories come together. And this game, so we're really looking at TV shows like that in terms of structure, and then you say, okay, let's map out these structures. Now, how do we deconstruct those structures so you can simulate them and we have a basically something in the game that's watching everything and deciding what content to fire next. I don't know if we have an official name for it. The in-house name for it is the conductor, and it fires off events based on a ton of heuristics of what has a player seen recently, what are they carrying, what decisions have they made, what's in their inventory, what's your health state, what interactions they have with this character, what interests they have with that character. Okay, let's fire this thing next. And then we do a lot of testing to see, does that feel good? Does that feel like shit? Does it feel like I don't care? The worst thing you have is I don't care, right? You'd rather somebody feel good or feel like shit about it than not care, because if they're passionate about it, you got something. But that is great. But we start from sort of deconstruction of existing narrative structures and then turn that into like heuristics and anything. I mean, like, most things can be converted. Like, if you look at, and we're not using, I'm really clear, we don't have any fancy AI under the hood. I'm nothing against AI, I use it for research now. It's an amazing tool for research when I'm writing, science fiction game, because I was a drama major when I try to, my science skills are somewhat limited. So it's been an amazing tool for that. But if there's no fancy AI, it's really just basically teaching a system when to fire what events when, based on player action X, Y, and Z, and then getting that wrong, watching people play, collecting data, and then adjust, and then, speeding that up, slowing that down, adding this, taking away that. And that's going to happen at runtime in the game, right? So you're basically teaching the game how to present the various types of content, whether that's combat, whether that's narrative scenes, whether that's treasure, whether that's audio logs, whatever that is, a mise-en-scène, a moment, a visual moment. These are all being, to a large degree, dynamically placed based on when the game thinks it's the right time. And we have to teach it all that, because it has no genius AI that just knows this to start. We just teach it, but we deconstruct, we learn, and then we try to teach, and then we fail, and then we look at audience feedback, and then we adjust the knobs and levers, and we get closer and closer to things that feel really dramatically powerful that are being generated in this sort of pseudo procedural manner.
Cool. Sounds like a system that would be really good for an RPG.
Yes. Yeah.
I really see this as being like a new step, because, RPGs are based so much around choice and character reactions to the choices you make, but they're still developed in a way that's very linear and non-spontaneous. And this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, the system is applicable to pretty much anything. RPGs would be a natural place. I think even like a game like Civilization, where all of a sudden Napoleon could have been watching that you did this, this, and that, and come to you and instead of just saying, be mad at you, complain about the actual things you did,
right?
And why he's mad at you, or why he's happy about you, and calling. I think players really like when the game's paying attention to them, and that's our mantra: pay attention to the player, let the player know that we're paying attention, let talk about what they did. Have the game talk about have the characters in the game talk about what they did, because you want to be the person in that story who matters, right? Because life is frustrating. Life, you're not always the person who matters most, right? Whether you're a parent, or whether you have a job you don't like, or whether, it's just the nature of life, or you're not always a star in life, right? But in a game, you get to be the most important person in the universe. And the games wants to pay, ideally we want the game to pay attention to the players, the specificity of what they did, rather than just giving them, in Bioshock, the game didn't really know anything about Jack, right? They know anything Infinite, the game didn't know anything about Booker. In the game here, the goal was that this game knows a lot about Judas and the player's version of Judas, because they've been watching the whole time.
Yeah. And then that will be surprising for players because they aren't used to being paid attention to in that way in games. And so that when you do have something that specific or that different from what we've experienced in the past, that I can see that being very surprising in a very satisfying way. That's neat.
Because you think about so, in conflict, you get into a fight with somebody. The fight's not just like, I'm mad at you, you suck. It's like, well, Eric, first you did this, then you did that, and then you did this. And it's like, you left me at the movie theater, you didn't show up. You didn't pay back the money I loaned you. These are very personal things, whether that's a friend fight or a romantic fight. And, we want to make a game where the game could say, if the character has a positive or negative experience with you, that they are talking about specifics about what you did and that's the things the player did. The player had a choice to do. It's not nearly as interesting if we force the player to do something,
right?
And then they do that. It's much more interesting when the player has a choice.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of single player games lose me these days, where I just start to get tired of being on rails too much, or where it just starts to feel like, well, I'm playing through this game and it's the same as so many other games I've played, different story, but the same structure, and I know what to expect. So having a fresh mechanical take on narrative is really exciting.
No, I can't wait for you to play it. If you do want to play it, test it, I don't know if you're waiting to review it, but I'd be very curious to see what you think.
Yeah, I'm very interested, so I'm down too.
Okay, let's talk about that. We'll talk about that offline.
For sure.
I have, as we wind down here, I have a theory question. Eric, did you have anything else on that topic before I jump on to something else?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Just, I do have a hard out in 10.
Yes, I know. I see. As we count down here, there'll be 100 questions that we missed, but maybe we'll do this again. Judas is a name that holds a lot of weight, obviously, biblically. Your story, I know when you create Bioshock, ultimately you just want to create great stories, but although Bioshock and Randyism isn't its own religious theme, you have that as a thematic pillar in Bioshock. In Infinite, you have American exceptionalism and really the religious overtone and how that deals with. And then obviously Judas, I'm not going to ask you specifically because you won't tell me, but I'm sure I could read into with the name. I guess a question I have for you, Ken, do you struggle with faith in any capacity? Are you a religious man?
No, I am a person who didn't used to struggle with needing to understand the meaning and purpose of life until the last 10 years. And that was part of the challenge of the last 10 years is all of a sudden needing that. Probably, my mom committed suicide like 8 years ago. And that was, that sort of threw me in a bit of a spiral of like looking for those things. And, I'm kind of jealous now with people who have religion because that gives you some very nice answers that, that fill in a lot of gaps. And if you don't have them, then you're sort of left, having to do a lot more searching. And, be also, being a guy like me, you also have to understand that I feel that there may be no answers, right? And the universe doesn't, there's a great line, I can't remember who said it, maybe it's Dawkins, universe doesn't owe you an explanation. And there's a lot of themes in this game about what, this is about a group of people. Judas is literally the last human left. We have this concept of reprinting on the ship. So people potentially, she could bring back people, but everybody, as far as she knows, everybody in human civilization is dead except for her. Just her and the machines left. And it's about, what kind of is she, and it's her responsibility that this happened to some degree. She was caught up in a situation, like many situations. We're all products of our environment too, right? And it's really dealing with a lot of the questions I've been asking myself. This is a bit of an existential piece where she's looking at, what she's done and is she happy that everybody else is dead? Because her experience of people have been so bad, on the ship. And she's called Judas because she's the most hated person on the ship because she's viewed as a traitor to this mission, which is supposed to bring life to the stars, the fading spark of humanity to the stars and reignite it. And she ended up being at the ass end of this society because she didn't know how to go along to get along. And she was brutalized by that society, and she destroyed it. And now she's trying to figure out, should she fix it? Can she fix it? And what does it mean to fix it? What does it mean if human civilization just ends? And, was it worth anything if it ends? Probably at some point, right? And these are really interesting questions that I just sort of took all the characters in the game. This is not like an autobiographical piece in the sense that like, oh, this person's me or that person's me. It's sort of a fragment of stuff I've been thinking about for the past 10 years, politically, scientifically. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. Like AI was not nearly the thing. This was a game about artificial intelligence, 10 years ago. And then obviously the ground moved under our feet. This is a game that the inciting event, why the ship left Earth, was somebody had basically a large language model that predicted the future for them based on past data and thought another plague was coming, right? Well, a plague was coming. This was before COVID. And then, that into his backstory. Because no, I know. Yeah. Like the world shifts out for you. No surprise, over 10 years. And I just keep bringing things from this experience. And you have to interpret through this funhouse lens of the game. It's not like this game's not about a 50-year-old game developer in Massachusetts. This is about this woman at the edge of survival in space. It's about these machines that she drove crazy because she gave them self-awareness that they didn't know they were machines, these three people. And it broke them all. And now, can they somehow cobble something back together out of this giant mess they all created? And we're also making a great first-person shooter with lots of player expression in the world and giving the player agency and choice, and have it be funny and have it be scary and have it be, another amazing society that you have to explore, and you want to understand it, and and us not telling you that, but finding it on your own as you explore, like we did with our previous games. These are all things that really matter to me. And it's definitely my most personal thing because I had a lot more to work out in the last 10 years than I did before. And so there's a lot more of that in it, I think.
It's very exciting.
As we close, I have like 5. I thought it would be a funny thing to have these quick fire questions to close. Eric, did you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, just these quick fire questions I wrote down. Simple one word, or don't answer them at all. It's entirely your choice, Ken. Quick fire number 1. We got plasmids or vigors?
You never forget your first love. I'd have to say plasmids.
Andrew Ryan or Comstock?
I think I understood Ryan a lot better when I wrote him. And I also had a great model of an existing human being, Rand. So I think I did better with Ryan than I did with Comstock.
Big Daddies or Songbird?
Oh, this is going to be bad because it's very Bioshock leaning. Again, I thought I understood what was inside that suit more with the Big Daddies than Songbird. So all these problems are of my own making. But yeah, I think Big Daddy.
Rapture or Columbia?
Now they each have their moments. There are some incredibly beautiful moments in Columbia, like when you first open the door to the city and you see all the balloon, the blimps coming in and the city moving around, and the music in Infinite is beautiful. The music and the feeling of, we want to really create this feeling of like being at, July 4th, 1912. And I think we really did an amazing job on putting this strange environment. So there's an eeriness to that space I love, but I love the look and colors of Rapture and the music as well. I'm very, it's also very much like the world I grew up in. I lived right near New York City, and New York just felt like Rapture to me. And it was my expression, my childhood view of New York was Rapture. And so I was pretty connected to that, where Columbia was a bit more abstract to me, but I like those both a lot.
Video games or film?
Film is special, but video games are a lifesaver for me. Like they've been my salve on wounds that movies couldn't be, because you get immersed, and only games immerse you in that way. And so I've gone through so many hard times by just getting a vacation from myself from games, and no other medium can do that. So games.
My last one was going to be if Judas was coming out this year, but I won't ask you that. My last one will be, did you enjoy doing this show with Eric and I? Yes or no?
I always love spending time with Eric, and I really like spending time with you. And so yes, and I would do it again. I really appreciate the time. I'm always flattered to be asked. And I definitely enjoyed it.
Ken, thank you so much. Yeah. We cannot wait for Judas. I'm sure I speak for everyone. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but only when it's ready. Eric?
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.